Story 1. When my family moved to the suburbs of Salem, Massachusetts, we felt as if we were leaving the chaos of city life for a quieter, simpler place. The house was a century-old farmhouse, nestled among tall pine trees, as old as its shadow at dusk. The air was fresh, the views peaceful, but there was something about the place that made me feel out of place. Our dog Baxter, usually calm and friendly, began acting strangely right away. Every night, without fail, he would growl and bark in the same corner of the living room. We would look but see nothing, but Baxter's mane would bristle, his teeth bared as if he were protecting us from some invisible threat. One crisp fall afternoon, as the leaves swirled in the wind, an old man appeared at our door. He introduced himself as Gene. He was polite enough, but there was something unsettling about him, something in the way he looked at me, as if he saw something I could get. He asked to sit with me in the backyard, and I agreed out of politeness. As we sat on the old porch, Gene's words were ragged, his sentences falling silent as he stared into space. His presence made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say why. After he left, my father found me on the porch, staring into the woods where Gene had disappeared. "What does he want?" my father asked, sounding worried. I answered, still staring at the trees. "Just to talk." My father's face hardened. "I don't like him. Stay away from Gene." I nodded, but the worry was still there. A few nights later, I woke to a soft knock on my window. My heart was pounding as I turned to see Gene standing outside, his pale face barely visible in the moonlight. His eyes stared at me unblinking, his expression unreadable. Panic surged through me. I stumbled out of bed and ran to my parents' room, screaming for my dad. My dad grabbed a flashlight and rushed out of the house, heading straight for Gene's. When he returned, his face was ashen. "What happened?" my mom asked, her voice laced with fear. "He doesn't live there. The house has been empty for years," my dad whispered. "We called the police soon after, but they found nothing, no trace of Gene, no sign that anyone had ever been there." Still, the feeling of being watched never went away. The nights grew longer, darker, and a sense of dread settled over our house like a thick fog. In those stifling, silent hours, I began to understand something chilling. We are not always alone, even when we think we are. There are forces that slip through the cracks of reality, entities that move through our lives unnoticed until they choose to, and when they do, they make us question the boundaries between the living and the dead, between what we know and what lies just beyond the veil. Story 2. 2 years ago, I bought a Victorian house in Savannah, Georgia, a city where the past never really fades. The house sat on the edge of Forsyth Park, its weathered exterior hinting at a history too deep to fully comprehend. Something about its worn floors and dusty hallways called to me, like the whispers of forgotten memories, and I thought it would be the perfect place to start over. As I settled in, unpacking the remnants of my old life, I decided to explore the attic. The space was littered with the remains of previous occupants, discarded furniture, yellowed newspapers, and a thick layer of dust that covered everything. It was then that I noticed a door, small and unobtrusive, hidden behind a stack of old boxes. It looked out of place, as if someone had tried to keep it out of sight. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned in protest, revealing a cramped, stuffy room. The stench hit me first, a musty, putrid odor that made my skin crawl. The light from my flashlight shone in, as if hesitant to reveal what was inside. In the corner, barely visible in the dim light, was a figure. I took a step closer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a girl, her body thin and frail, her clothes little more than rags clinging to her thin frame. Her hair was disheveled, her skin pale, as if she had never seen the sun. But it was her eyes that haunted me, wide with fear, scanning the room as if searching for a way out. I called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what I had found. When they arrived, their expressions mirrored my own disbelief. They approached her cautiously, speaking softly, but she didn't answer. She just stared at them with those wide, haunted eyes. As they led her outside, one of the officers mentioned that she was being taken to a psychiatric facility, but no one could explain why she was there, or for how long. The house, it seemed, had hidden her as if it didn't want to let her go. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of her huddled in that corner was seared into my mind. The house was silent, but the silence was oppressive, as if it were holding its breath. I felt like an intruder, as if I had disturbed something that should have been left alone. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house had chosen me, drawn me into its web of secrets. In Savannah, where the past clings to every stone, I realized that some homes are more than just places to live. They're prisons holding the lost and forgotten, refusing to let them go. Story 3. I'd always wanted a place in New Orleans, a city where history was in the air and the supernatural seemed like a breath away. The house I found was old, tucked away on a quiet street in a garden district, with ivy creeping up the walls and an iron gate that creaked in the wind. It felt like it had secrets, and that intrigued me. After the movers left and the last boxes were stacked, I decided to explore the basement. It was a dark, damp space, the kind of space that felt colder than the rest of the house. I scanned the room with my flashlight, and that's when I saw a wooden rocking chair, old and worn, sitting in the far corner. I didn't remember seeing it during the walk, but there it was, as if it had been waiting for me. Have you seen this before? I called my friend Emily, who had helped move things. She poked her head through the basement door. What? The chair? No, it wasn't here before, was it? I shrugged, pushing away the anxiety that was running down my spine. I guess so. The house was strangely quiet that night, the kind of silence that seemed like a prelude to something worse. Then from deep in the basement, I heard the slow, rhythmic creaking of the rocking chair. My skin tingled with fear, and every instinct screamed at me to stay in bed, but something pulled me toward the basement door. With a shaking hand, I grabbed the flashlight and slowly made my way down the stairs. The creaking grew louder, more insistent. I reached the bottom of the stairs and swept the light around the room. Hello? My voice echoed, swallowed by the darkness. In the light, I saw her, an old woman, frail and thin, her body swaying gently in her chair. Her eyes were closed, her face etched with sadness. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was as if time had stopped, trapping us both in that cold moment. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment, she was gone. The chair remained motionless, as if nothing had happened. I ran upstairs, slamming the basement door behind me. Emily found me in the kitchen, pale and shaking. She asked, her voice filled with concern. What happened? There was a woman in the basement. She was just sitting there, in the chair. I stuttered, the words tumbling out. Emily frowned. Are you sure? Maybe you imagined it? I didn't imagine anything. She was there. I snapped, my fear turning to anger. The next day, I called the police, but they found nothing. No sign of anyone, dead or alive. I learned later that the old woman was the previous homeowner's mother. She had died in that very chair years ago, but her spirit had never left. The basement became a place I avoided, the atmosphere a somber presence that refused to rest. Every creak, every groan of the house was like her, still rocking in that chair, waiting for someone to remember her. It made me realize that in New Orleans, a city where the dead are never truly gone, our homes are shared with the dead. Their stories are etched on the walls, and sometimes they're not willing to let go.